They say research is the bedrock of good journalism. You study, you gather data, you talk to people, and then you report. Well, that's how it usually works. But not at the New York Times, it seems. Their strategy is the exact opposite. First, decide the narrative, then write a report to suit that narrative. Facts don't matter. Let me show you the latest example. This article was published on the 28th of March. Look at the headline. General strike throws India into confusion. Now, let me guess your first reaction. What general strike? Actually, there is a two-day strike underway. It began on Monday. It continued on Tuesday. Who called the strike? Central trade unions across India. What do they want? Broadly speaking, two things. A, roll back proposed changes to the labour law, and B, slow down privatisation. They're calling it an all-India strike, but frankly, it's not. Anybody who has stepped out of their house will tell you that. Cars are moving freely on the roads in India. The only thing obstructing them is traffic jams, and we can do without them. Trains are running fine. Government offices are working. So where exactly is this strike happening? In pockets. In Kerala, for instance, there was a partial shutdown. Buses and taxis were not plying. A few government employees did not turn up, but essential services were unaffected. Same in parts of West Bengal. But beyond that, there was nothing. No mass rallies, no reports of violence, and certainly no confusion. So how did the New York Times get this idea? Because they said the narrative first, and then they wrote the article. Now, don't get us wrong. We're not condemning the strike itself. It was announced in advance, so people had time to prepare. It was limited to 2 days, so no long-term impact. Plus, it's a free country. You can go on strike if you want to. Our issue is with the New York Times' characterization, or should I say mischaracterization. This wasn't a nationwide rebellion, as they made it sound. Most Indians barely knew it was even happening. So how was India thrown into confusion? It wasn't. I'll tell you who is confused here. The editors of the New York Times. On social media, their article triggered hilarious reactions. We've compiled some of the best ones for you. This user, for example, is inconsolable. Why? Because no one informed him about the strike. He could have taken a holiday. And this user is thinking along the same lines. Let me tell you what he wrote. If you're working today, then send this NY Times post to your manager. It is supposed to be a strike holiday. Jokes aside, this is nothing short of fake news, we say. Just think about it. A tiny strike is being blown out of proportion. It is being portrayed as a nationwide revolt. How is this not fake news? Let me quote what the article says. The strike has spread to large parts of India, with supporters of the walkout blocking roads and train tracks and public transportation absent from the streets of many towns. Again, this is not true. Maybe a couple of trains were blocked, a few streets were deserted. But remember the size of India. This is a country of 1.4 billion people. A handful of trains blocked is not a nationwide revolt. At best, it's a distraction. But coming back to my first question, how did the New York Times arrive at this conclusion about this confusion? Did they talk to people? Well, they did. Two people. Two people have been quoted in their article. One is a Communist Party member. The second is a trade union representative. Talk about balanced reportage. No comment from the government, no official response. They simply went with their narrative. And just to be clear, this is the same New York Times that published an op-ed by Taliban leader Sirajuddin Haqqani. They have no problem publishing white supremacists either. But an elected Indian government? Well, that's a strict no-no. And the bias does not end there. This article is a perfect example of picking and choosing facts. I'll show you an instance. Here's what the NYT wrote about the strike in South India. In Kerala, it says, in the south, streets were empty and shops shuttered. What a sweeping statement. Here's what the NYT did not report. The Kerala High Court has barred government employees from striking. And I had the order with me. And I'll tell you what it says. One way of looking at the rule is that the government servant has no right to participate in any strike. Equally, it is the duty of the government to prevent the government servant from joining in strikes. Why did the NYT not report this part? Because it did not suit their narrative. And this selective reporting is only for India, by the way. The West gets a free pass. Take a look at this NYT report from March 9th. What does the headline say? Trucker convoy near Washington, D.C. is a low-key protest. So the NYT does understand scale. They do know what is a large protest and what is not. In India, they just chose to ignore it. And it's not the first time. Do you remember their job offer last year? NYT wanted anti-government candidates in India. This is not how balanced journalism works. You need to do your research. You must catch the pulse on the ground. If not, you'll get trolled like the New York Times. They reported a strike that India was yet to discover. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.